Nation, what's up? Stoked to be back with you guys on a Thursday night. I mean, I look forward to Thursday nights. I don't know about you, Brian. I'm sure you do too.
Oh, for sure.
But it's like I get to go to the bar for a little bit. It's a digital bar. It's not 100% like the real thing, but it's also a lot of fun. So pretty jacked for this.
I've been thinking all week to try and get the right Nation hand down, and then you flip things.
I changed it. Yeah,
and you went with the other one.
Yeah.
I was normally waiting all week for this.
I've done both before, but normally I go right hand. But then today, I don't know why I went. Oh, I had my right finger on I needed to change the background since we went from 3 people down to 2. And so as soon as we went on, I changed the background and I changed my finger. So I would say either is appropriate, for the Neat Nation salute. I don't want to take it to full cult level or in any way approach the salutes that people have abused in many ways, many times. That's not why we're here today. Here to drink some whiskey, and we're not going to waste any time before we bring our guest on, who's graciously joined us. And we've been talking about this one a while, Brian, and I'm super excited. Like, I don't want to make Ryan uncomfortable, but of all the folks in the whiskey community, if I'm a fan of one person in particular, it's Ryan, just because I appreciate how down to earth and swell of a dude he seems to be. And I've never met him. I met him maybe 60 seconds ago, but that's my general impression of Ryan. Other people seem to share that. So we'll see how blushed he is as we bring him on here.
That's right.
Hi, Ryan.
Don't meet your idols.
So, I mean, if you guys don't know, Ryan is co-host of the Bourbon Pursuit podcast, co-founder of Pursuit Spirits, and that's manifested itself in several ways now through their own single barrel bottlings, and now the release of the Pursuit United Bourbon and Rye, which we thankfully will get to taste tonight. So, Ryan, welcome.
Yeah, you're one of the only ones that I think have tasted it. So
exclusivity,
people in the lab and whatnot. So lucky you.
Nice. Yeah.
Well, my dad did the other night at a campfire. So there were supposed to be more samples, but we were at a campfire and had too much, and so I apologize that your sample's very small.
Yeah, I think it's a half of an ounce, but it's gonna work. Brian was texting me. He's like, I think we're gonna be able to try the rye, and then he's like, nope, we can't try the rye. No, yeah, actually we can try the rye. But then he sent it 2 days ago, and I live 8 hours away, so I'm like, I don't think it's gonna get here, dude. But then it got here 3 hours ago. So
I got you.
Wow.
I knew
Perfect
it would.
timing.
I knew it would.
That's awesome.
You gotta believe, man.
Well, no, I'm super excited to be here and grateful that you want to have me on. This is all a dream to me, and I'm just super grateful to be a part of this community and everything it's done for me. So I'm happy to spend time with you guys and chat about whatever you want to chat about.
Sweet. Well, we're gonna chat about you a lot. I know that makes some people uncomfortable. Hopefully it doesn't make you uncomfortable.
Well, it's nice being on this side, not having to come up with the questions.
Sure.
That's right. That even though we got a system kind of now, but no, it's good to be on this side.
All right. Yeah, we'll try and take all the pressure off and keep it flowing at you. First, though, we do 2 bits at the start of every show. And that is, what are you drinking? And then we're going to talk about, how did the hunting go this week? Did you pick anything up? If so, what? Did you pass on anything? And it's different for everybody based on, of course, their phase in their journey. Last I heard from you, you said you weren't buying too much, but we'll get there. Let's start with, what are you drinking? Brian, why don't you kick us off? Then we'll hear from Ryan.
Yep, I am pouring. What was the last one I poured? I am drinking a little bit of some Peerless bourbon. So not had a lot of this stuff. The first time I had it was I got to try a sample of Merle's Whiskey Kitchen's pour that they did. I did a sticker for the bottle for that. And then when it came in, I was able to try it. And it was a lot different than I thought it would be. I don't know what I thought Peerless bourbon would taste like. But theirs specifically had like a lot of like savory, smoky, like pork-like notes to it. It was like bacon and maple syrup. It was like a combination, one of those combinations you don't find in a lot of bottles. But I have a couple of others over here, and they're all different. So this one is a little bit more on like the fruity, a fruity, a little citrusy side. I don't know. That's what I'm drinking right now.
Dank. Ryan, what about you, man?
Well, this is gonna sound conceited, but I'm drinking Pursuit United.
There you go.
Tends to be my my daily drinker. So I create. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about it more, but I created it because it's what I like. And but I was earlier drinking some Russell's Bookend before this. It was a pick we did through a keg and bottle in our Patreon community, and it's a really solid one. So gotta love Russell's. And as far as hunting, I haven't hunted in 4 or 5 years. Brian was gracious enough and called me yesterday about an Old Forester Rye single barrel, and that dropped at Total Wine, and I didn't have time to make it. And but haven't hunted in a while, unfortunately. But I used to, and it was a lot of fun. Just haven't in a while.
That's right.
Do you, when you buy, what do you buy? Because for me in Milwaukee, as much as you might like to hunt, there's just nothing to hunt. Like I got totally shafted yesterday on a hunt. I'll talk about that in a minute. But what's the last thing you actually bought?
That's a good question. Probably High Noons or a bottle of wine.
Okay, well that's fair.
Because with all the single barrels we do with the Patreon community, last year we did 40, and Kenny and I get 2 bottles a piece out of those, and then with every Pursuit Spirits release, we keep a case each, and with that, and then all the samples and bottles we get sent, to review from the podcast, my wife would be like, "Why the hell are you buying more bourbon?"
Totally fair.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I'm trying to think. I did buy. I think I did buy an Old Forester or a birthday bourbon and a President's one time when I was there probably in like November, December. That's probably the last bottle I bought at a liquor store. That's totally
No, dude, you're probably helping out the rest of us for sure. But it's totally understandable too. Like if you're pulling that many of your own picks, 40, I mean, that's ridiculous. That's a lot. That is a lot of whiskey.
It is. And now I'm like, when people come over, friends or family, I'm like, if you need a bottle, just go pick whatever you want out.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Just take something home because I'm running out of room. And I know that sounds like crazy, but I literally, if you come over, Brian, I should have gave you one, but I gave you whatever you wanted to drink, but you can have whatever you want.
I'll come back over tomorrow.
It's a fun place to be where you're just like, I just have more than I know what to do with. So you can have, I mean, at that point, you kind of should be generous, but it's also fun to play Santa Claus a little bit, especially for whiskey noobs who are like, "Oh, I've never had that. I want to try that." You got to be Santa Claus. Yeah, spread joy.
And the hard part about COVID is not having people or friends over to share it. And you're like, "Gosh, I want to share this with people." But that's slowly changing, and people are starting to get to visit and come over. So hopefully, they'll start weaning down the whiskey collection. So.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'm starting to have some folks over too. Had whiskey night a couple of weeks ago, and then I've got a few meetups coming up, so it should be fun. What am I drinking? I'm drinking our Starlight Double Oaked Rye pick. I keep going back to this one because, oh man, it's so good. It's ridiculous. Really enjoy that one. So just having little bits at a time, and and then I'll drink these Pursuit United samples and just sit. But hunting, it was actually an entertaining week for me hunting. I was at Costco, and they had the Maker's 46 cask release at Costco, and I hadn't picked one of those up earlier, so I got one of those.
That's very good. I like that one. Yeah,
I think Maker's special releases have been crushing. I loved the what do I have? So I forgot their 2021 was out. 2020 I loved. 2021 I think is even better. And then the cask, I'm looking forward to popping that because I heard that was great. Then if you follow my Instagram, you know that a Four Roses Tier 5 OESV 11-year dropped at Total Wine. And then I wasn't able to go right away. 5 hours later, it was sold out. It was supposed to be limit one, and then it was showing up on this local secondary markets where people are like, 220, multiples available. I'm like, well, how in the flying flip did you get multiples if it was supposed to be limit one? So I was PO'd, but I bought a Russell's pick from Total Wine when I was there since I didn't get the Four Roses. And I've been really into the turkeys recently.
Oh, yeah. You can't go wrong.
No. And I totally undervalued wild turkey for quite some time. And I've learned my lesson because the rare breed and the picks and the Master's Keeps are just bangers. And then finally, Blake released, he had for sale the Still Austin cask strength, and I've been journeying through craft whiskey, and the best Texas whiskey I've had so far is Still Austin. And so when I saw the special release and Blake was touting it, I was like, okay, I'll take one. And the price was reasonable. It's like $60 or something for that.
Yeah, we just got a bottle of it, and we did a whiskey quickie review on it like 2 days ago, and I was blown away by it. At 2 years old, I was like, holy cow.
Just the standard still or the cask?
No, the cask strength,
okay.
The black label. It was really good. I mean,
It's
there's
only
still slightly youth notes, but for 2 years, holy cow, they're doing something right. So I'm excited to see it's only going to get better, I think. So
I didn't realize it was only 2 years old. I'm glad I didn't know that when I bought it, if it's supposed to be good, because I mean, it's hard to get a good whiskey at 4, let alone at 2, you know.
Hell, some of them at 6 or 8 are not good.
Sure. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So I've been on a journey to taste 100 different craft whiskeys this year. And it's been eye-opening in a positive sense in some regards, because I've found some distilleries that are crushing, found some really great single barrels. On the other hand, it's generally depressing, just mainly because of the age component. Like some of these whiskeys taste pretty good, like really good distillate that just needs more time in a barrel.
Sure.
You know, it is what it is. All right. That's our bits, right? Did we go through them? Yeah, good. All right, 44 people in the chat. What's up, y'all? We'll take care of some housekeeping here, and then we'll get into some of our formal questions. As you all know, it runs pretty free form here, and Brian will have the fun task of editing it down later. If you guys want to hit us up with any questions for Ryan or just topically as we go through, just make sure you at me in the chat so I see it. Otherwise, there's a pretty good chance that I won't see it and we'll miss the question. There are links down in the show notes, and I actually need to add the Pursuit Spirits stuff links, which I will do at the end of this show. But if you want to follow my channel or Brian's channel, links are down below. There's also the link to our Patreon there as well, if you want to support that way, or you can also support via Super Chat. You all do you. All right. Well, let's get into your story, Ryan. But before we do that, this is a question we like to ask everybody. We kind of start with this question that we ask everybody, and then we end with a question that we ask everybody. This first one, though, is deeply personal in that Brian and I sling coffee for a living. It's what we do. Different company, same deal. And so your relationship to coffee is very important to us. And Brian knows it. And actually, I think I might remember what your drink is, but why don't you articulate for us your either affection or your affiliation? How would you describe your relationship with coffee?
Yeah, I think coffee is how I met Brian. I'm a huge Quills fan. Live exactly 0.75 miles from the St. Matthews location. And I do not get a mocha, or a caramel latte, but I do get, me and my wife, I get 2 12-ounce almond milk lattes.
Okay.
Probably 4 to 5 times a week.
It's a respectable order.
And, I do sometimes will venture off and get a drip coffee, but a lot of times I don't have the time, to do it, and they're busy and I feel bad asking them to do it. And so, but the times I have, it's been worth it. But yeah, almond milk latte, they have the perfect, I've been to a million coffee places all across the country, even in Italy and Spain, and Quills just has everything dialed in. It's perfectly balanced. It's the perfect temperature. It's the perfect ratio of espresso to almond milk. It's perfect almond milk. It's perfect froth. I don't know. I can't.
You're feeling
everywhere
it.
I go somewhere else, I'm disappointed. So,
and I applaud you too, because ever since we rolled out with oat milk, the soy and almond combined asks just drop, and oat milk is everyone orders oat more than anything. I don't know if the same is like that with you, Drew, at your cafes, but so like anyone who stays sticking with the soy or an almond, I salute you. Way to stick to it.
Yeah, they asked me one time. I think Joel was working. He was like, "You want to try this oat milk?" And I was like, "Sure." And I was like, "Back to almond."
It just tastes like oatmeal. Like I don't know why.
Yeah.
Dude, it's a texture thing. The texture of oat milk is far superior, in my opinion. And I was hesitant because I thought it tasted like oatmeal. But then, like, not all oat milk's created equal either. Like, I'm pretty happy with the Pacific Barista Series brand of oat milk that we've been using. And that's what I usually get if I get a latte, which is not super often, but I get in moods, you know? I was going to say something. Oh, Brian, can you check and make sure that your audio is coming through your good mic? Because you're sounding a little echoey. Brian, not Ryan.
Yep. It's right where it was.
Okay. All right. That's fine. I'm just getting some echoes off your back wall or whatever, but you can filter that out in post. I read a great article, totally unrelated, but helpful, like good life lessons. Read a great article the other day about the cost impact of fixing it in post, whether it's a business development thing. Like it's far better to fix it fix it while you're doing it, far cheaper in general to build something right the first time versus like retroactively going back and fixing it. So
our editor would say the same thing. She's like, we got a checklist now that's like, everything's got to be, you figure out as you go. But beginning, it was us sitting around a iMac and it was terrible. Now she's got it dialed in, so we got it all figured out.
I appreciated the short episode during Big Rona where Kenny interviewed her. What's her name? It's his wife, but Lauren. Okay, it was just so because you wonder about that. Like I think my wife and I would struggle to work together. Like we recreate together really well, like really.
Oh, and they do too. No, I'm kidding.
So I just wondered, like, what is that like? And of course, Kenny went into interview mode, and it was kind of an interesting dynamic in that episode. But maybe you can give us a peek behind that curtain into Kenny and Lauren's personal life.
It's funny. They, I'll go there and they have an office they share, and they both will have their headphones on, and like they sit like right across from each other, and they will zone each other out. Like it's amazing. Or Kenny will just go down to the basement. She'll kick him down to the basement, and he's down there by himself. But no, they're great to work with, and it's a lot of fun because I get to see them, duke it out, before we record whiskey quickies or any. You can tell like what Lauren's made a point of emphasis before we record an episode and whatnot. That's awesome. So it's a lot of fun for me, at least. It might not be for Kenny or Lauren, but it's fun for me seeing them too.
Good. Yeah, I know some couples that are able to work together, and I think you sort of have to make changes and build boundaries and how you work in order to preserve your personal relationship. So hats off to the folks who can do it. My wife and I really haven't tried. I'm more scared, I think, than anything else to like try and make that work. Mainly because I am impatient. It's probably my personal flaws that would get in the way of that. But let's move on. Let's keep going in our topics today, and that's really to hear about your journey, Ryan, from the starting in bourbon, the growth of Bourbon Pursuit, and then we'll ultimately get to Pursuit Spirits, and then we'll crack these whiskeys open. So just take us back, and I'm sure you've talked about it at length on your own pod, but talk to us about how you fell in love with whiskey, pre-Pursuit.
Well, people kid with me all the time because I say I'm from Bardstown.
Yeah,
on the podcast, but I am from Bardstown, so it's hard to not be around or exposed to bourbon, and so I think the first time I had my buddy Pikey, we were at a high school party, and we had Evan Williams Black Label, I think, and
you're 14.
I 14, 15, 16, something where around there, but anywho, that was kind of the first experience, and then through college and high school, typical, progression. You drink it with Coke, and then you graduate and you kind of get it start drinking it with water, then you're drinking it with ice, and then you start drinking neat. And then also too, my dad owned a machine shop in Bardstown where he did tool and die repair for the distilleries. And so like if they, these distillery equipment's really old, it's special manufactured equipment. So if they had like a gear or shaft breakdown, he was the one that would go and repair it and fix it. And then so he had relationships with the distilleries, and then I had a lot of family and friends like Freddie No and Drew Colesveen that I went to high school with. And they obviously are, at the time, no one cared about them or who they were. We were just all kids hanging out in Bardstown. And, so I was just around it my whole life. And then probably didn't take it like seriously till, I don't know, you turn like, I think I was probably like 28 or 30. And, I think the first bottle that was like, okay, that got me serious was a Pappy 15. It was the first time I drank it like neat. And then I noticed my dad and others had like Elijah Craig 21s or 18s, 22s, and Noah Mill 15s and Rowan's 12s. And, started taking those, drinking those. And then it was from there, it was just like a rabbit hole. And, it was fun because you could go to a liquor store and you camp, meet all people, but there was only like 10 of you, and it wasn't like this crazy thing that it is now. But that's kind of how it all got started and led to where I am today. So that's kind of how I got into bourbon.
How do you, so I'm going to totally pivot and throw a question out of left field. But having been into bourbon, aware of it, and then appreciating it pretty early on relative to Brian or myself, how do you feel about where the industry is and the fandom? Like,
yeah, it's hard to it's still hard like to take it seriously, and like I take it seriously, but it's hard to just wrap my head around it because my uncle also, he had a company that made the boxes for Booker's in Knob Creek, and I saw him struggle for years just making a few thousand boxes for them and making cabinets on the side, and then for him to go to struggling to like being like this explosive business that they can't keep up, and the demands just like, and then just all my my family and friends working at Heaven Hill or at Jim Beam and Barton's, and just seeing it explode and the impact it's had on Bardstown. And it's just like mind blowing. And it's because no one really cared about it. And and now that people come here and they're asking me where to stay, what restaurants, and what, it's just totally mind blowing. That's what I thought Napa was for, or, San Francisco, or like a destination shitty for food or wine or whatever. But it's pretty cool. It's a humbling, because everyone in Bardstown and bourbon, they're such great people and they deserve like all the attention and everything. Cause there's been so many people behind the scenes that have been just grinding and working this industry forever. And for them to get the exposure and the limelight, it's well deserved. But it's still mind blowing to me.
Yeah. And I think you bring a lot of unique perspective there because you grew up in it when it's still fairly humble. Not that they're not humble now, but humble beginnings pre-major boom. Whereas, when I go there, it's already Mecca in my mind, where it's like I've fallen in love with the product while in Wisconsin, and then I go there, and of course it's going to be awesome and huge, and everybody's going to go crazy for it. And of course I want to know where to get, what the best bourbon bars to go to are and the like. Whereas somebody who grew up in it when it wasn't that way, it's unique perspective.
Yeah.
Do you find go ahead.
Oh no. And it's like everybody, being around it, everybody's asked, when do you think it's going to peak? And I was like, it's probably going to peak, in a year or two. And I've said that about 10 times now. So now I'm just going to stop trying to predict it because it just keeps going. So
yeah, it's like, when is Jesus coming back?
Right. Exactly. We just keep waiting.
Yeah. Right. It's a crazy people will make the prediction. Go ahead, Brian.
No, I was just gonna say a lot of things that you mentioned, after your Pappy 15 are like some epic and some old bottles.
Absolute
So like,
unicorns.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
if you've been in whiskey for a while, though, you might develop a palate for that kind of stuff. But having tried those things early, did that set your palate up for like is your profile still in that age range of whiskey or that style of whiskey, or like, have you shifted with what seems like the times and the way that whiskey is
What do you
bottled and
go for?
distilled nowish? Yeah, what's your ideal profile, and has it stuck with what you first started with? Or shifted?
No. I mean, what I first started with was, like everyone else, sweeter profiles like, Pappy, obviously. I mean, a 15 years, 107 proof, so it's not that sweet, but it's sweet, but it has a nice spice on the end. But I really loved like Elijah Craig, just 94 proof. I loved like I remember liking like just regular Old Forester and like Henry McKenna way before people did. And then like, toasted barrels. I really liked the Michter's Toasted when it came out in like 2014. And, you kind of like those like more sweeter notes like brown sugar, vanilla, caramel, honey, those basic bourbon notes. But as your palate, you kind of get bored and fatigued with that. And so you start moving into like Four Roses and Russells where you're starting to get these like fruity, bold spice flavors. And so it kind of transitions more to that. And then you kind of get, okay, well, what's next? And then now my thing is like trying to find like unique mash bills or unique distilleries that are just bringing so much unique flavor. Because Kentucky bourbon, each distillery has like, their unique profile, but they're all kind of similar in some regard. You got a lot of caramel, vanilla, brown sugar, those type of notes, some sweet oak, as Kenny loves. But I'm kind of more now like I love those things like as a base, but I'm looking for more like vibrant fruits. I'm looking for more spice. I don't necessarily I like barrel proof, but I'm not looking for so much heat or explosion. I want something that's kind of I like spice, but I don't want to be overpowered by the alcohol. I don't want the alcohol to be what I remember something by. I want the grains to be more of the spice that I remember. And so it's just kind of evolved, to I, I think one of your questions you sent me was like, what's your typical or favorite profile? And it's something that on the front palate has like brown sugar, butter, vanilla, creamy, viscous notes, but then it opens up in this floral, fruity, spicy, citrusy kind of finish to where it just sits on the back palate and you remember it. That's kind of my go-to if I can, and I did try to create it with, or Kenny and I did with Pursuit United, but that's kind of where I go towards.
Nice. Yeah, that was a comprehensive answer. Thank you. And I empathize. I'm so glad to hear you kind of talk about proof, not as something that, like I just super high proof. You're like, I don't want the burn and intensity. And I'm sort of fighting a personal crusade against proof mongering, call it that, where it seems like the higher the proof, the better. And if it's lower proof, it tends to get smashed regardless. Like we saw it with George T. Stagg 2019. We're seeing it right now with Elijah Craig Barrel Proof Batch B this year, where I'm wondering, is it because people are finding the whiskey to actually be different in quality, like it's not as good, or is it because that they just want to get punched in the mouth repeatedly by the most intense whiskey they can find? And my theory is because I see a consistent pattern that it tends to be that they just want to get punched in the mouth. That said, I actually haven't tasted GTS blind 2019 blind against the other years. I haven't had that kind of whiskey access. So TBD on my findings.
If you taste it objectively, it's got good flavor. It's just mouth feels a little, it's not punching same way.
Yeah, and all, I mean, barrel proof's great. You get a lot of complex notes, but I mean, some of the best whiskeys I've ever had in my life are 86 proof, 90 proof, 94 proof. They're perfectly balanced. They have nuances and just so much depth and complexity to them, even at a low proof. I wouldn't just solely choose on proof alone.
I'm just gonna check in here before I go to the next question. Is everything coming through smoothly for you guys?
As far as
audio,
everything, yeah.
Okay, all right. I'm getting a little indication that my connection is not great. Being out in the boonies, unfortunately, but everything seems smooth so far. So, folks in the chat, sign off if not sign off. Please don't do that. But let us know if we have picture or audio problems on your end. Otherwise, I think we're fine. So coming out of your years then of whiskey experience and exploration, are there any particular bottles, drams that have stood out to you that you're just like, man, that was legendary? Like top 3, top 5 kind of stuff that stands out to you as mind-blowing, life-changing?
Yeah, so probably the best thing I've ever had was I was up at Jack Rose's with Bill Thomas, stayed at his house, and
nice.
He was like, whatever you want, I was like, well, whatever you're willing to share,
Yeah, right.
And he has, everything you could ever ask for. And he's such a gracious host and was so like fun to be around. But I was like, well, man, what's your favorite pour? And he's like, well, I'll get you some. He goes upstairs, he brings it down. It was a green glass Van Winkle rye from Lawrenceburg.
Oh gosh.
And man, that was, I'll never forget that pour. It was so good. It's probably my favorite pour I've ever had. But Cured Oak is one of my
E.H.
top
Taylor
bottles I've ever had. Every time I go to it, it's so good, and Kenny loves it too. But
that's like 19 years old too, right? Isn't it?
I think it's 17.
It's pretty old.
Yeah, okay. It was 17 years old. And typically I don't love older whiskeys. I mean, I like oak, but I don't want it to be like the primary note in it. But Cured Oak's just like perfectly balanced. It's so good. It's got like everything going on for it. And I've had some crazy Willet bottles, some just, I can't, the C barrel, the 22 barrels, those are fantastic. I've had some great gold wax ones, rye bottles. It's but probably those 3, and national distillers, anything from the 70s to early 90s, like an Old Grandad, or I'm a sucker for those butterscotch bombs. I used to have, I took it for granted before people got into Dusty's. I would go to estate sales and get them around here for like $50 a bottle and just have them as everyday drinkers. And then that dried up quickly, and it was a mistake. I should have hung on to those. Those were so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We all have those regrets, and you probably have more than most of us because you've just been around it longer. Looks like we've got Kenny in the chat. He said the Cured Oak was cured perfectly.
Yep.
I assume that's Kenny. We'll have Kenny on at some point too if he's willing. How does your bar compare to Kenny's? Because we see pictures of Kenny's all the time. We know you're chock full of your own single barrels, but Kenny's got those rows upon rows of the Willett family estates and everything else.
The other day, and I told
Kenny's
them
the bar you go
they need
to
some videos there.
Yeah, Kenny's bar you go to if you want epic pours. He's got a lot of great bottles. He's got, gosh, I mean, I don't even want to say the dollar amount, but he's got a great selection of unicorns, Dusties, modern stuff, tons of Willets. Every time I show up, I cost him $1,000 because I'm just wanting to open up something. But compared to my bar, whereas I'm not a good collector or like hang on to stuff. Like when I like something, I drink it. So I don't have a ton of like unicorns or special bottles because whatever I have, I've drank because whenever somebody comes over, I'm like, you got to have this. And,
well, it's awesome. That's amazing.
I'm willing to share too much, but I do have, some good Willet bottles. I got one of my favorite bottles too. I forgot to mention this is a Evan Williams 12-year Japanese export that was from like the late 90s. That's one of another favorite bottle of mine. But Brian saw it. I built this bar, for our Pursuit series because I thought we were going to do like 12 a year, and now we got 40. So I ran out of room like really quick. So
Yeah.
there's just a lot of Pursuit series, a lot of our barrel picks, because those to me are the unicorns. You can get limited releases, and which they're fine and they're fun, but the barrel picks is where I really enjoy.
Nice. I got to call Kenny out for this because he says, please don't put me more on the radar. But I'm sure it was his idea to start TikTok, right? And then he's always posting shots of him in front of his bar on TikTok. So, like, yeah.
You should show it off.
It seems seems a little bit like false modesty. I'm just going to.
Oh, yeah. Kenny loves TikTok and his bar. So, yeah, he should show it off. It's
remarkable. Yeah.
Design into it. And like all of us, he built it too small. And so if you ever go there, you got to go to his storage room. That's where all the hidden gems. You've got a whole nother section.
Yeah. So I inherited this bar when I bought the house, and they set it up pretty nice. It's worked great for getting the channel started. And we'll just see where it goes. But in Milwaukee, there's totally a limit to what I can buy, particularly with I'm not making purchases on the secondary market. Like no one can really afford that. I mean, come on. So it's a slow process, but it's a lot of fun. And I love the samples. I love the sample swapping so much too. Is just getting to try a whole bunch of stuff is more fun than having a whole bunch of stuff. Not that I don't have a decent amount. Like it's more than a reasonable person should have. All right, let's keep moving. That was great. So let's go to the pod journey then, because that's really interesting. I mean, I've heard references on Bourbon Pursuit, and I'm sure you guys may have talked about this early on. I started listening to the pod probably 4.5 years ago or something. Maybe.
Wow.
Yeah. So pretty early before you hit 100. But I don't think I ever heard, here's how the pod got started. So I've heard reference that it was your idea or you started it, or just take us through that story. How did you guys decide to start a bourbon podcast when there was not much? Like, what was going on at the time? Why did you decide to do it? Who else was doing it? Give us that narrative.
Yeah. So at the time, so I have several businesses, but my main business is a lawn care business, and so I'm in my truck a lot, and so I listen to podcasts like Tim Ferriss, Kevin Rose, Joe Rogan. I listen to them all the time, and so, but I was, I loved bourbon, interested in bourbon, but there was like one podcast, a couple, but they were kind of, I couldn't sit through one, and listen to it. And I originally was going to start a podcast on lawn care, talking about spraying and equipment and this and that. And then I was like, well, that's probably not going to get too much traction and whatnot. So I was having dinner with my brother-in-law, and which he works at Heaven Hill. He's the head purchaser. He buys all the glass bottles and whatnot. He's like, dude, I was telling him about podcasts. And I was like, well, let's talk about bourbon. Why don't you come on? He was like, nah, I don't think so, but I think you should start a bourbon podcast. And then I was like, yeah, I think I should. And then, Kenny and I had become friends through our wives. They were friends, and I had a derby party, and we met. I was into bourbon, he was into bourbon, and so we would hang out and share bottles and stuff. And I was like, hey man, and I knew Kenny was in the tech space, and he had technical background. I'm a lawn guy. I don't know tech stuff, computer recording, all that stuff. So my first thought was I got to reach out to Kenny, see if he'd be interested. And he did a lot of public speaking through his company. So I just knew he had everything that I was lacking. I had a lot of connections, because I knew a ton of people in the bourbon industry. And so I thought it would be unique that we would go around and Kenny's boss too kind of gave him the idea. It was like, you all just need to not make it about you all. You need to go and just interview the people that know stuff. You all go ask them the hard question, or go ask them the questions, because you're which we were nobodies we didn't understand, but we were interested. So we were interested in these topics. We were interested in bourbon. We wanted to understand more. And so that's what we did. So we in my basement was the first episode. We sat around a MacBook and we're like, what's your favorite bourbon? Weller 12. And what's yours? And it was terrible, but we stumbled through it, and we went on a journey of, I went and interviewed Mike Sawney at Heaven Hill, who is probably one of the most unknown persons in bourbon, but has the most impact. He's created brands like Larceny and Old Fitz, resurrects Old Fitz, and picks all the Parkers and Elijah Craig barrel proofs. And so it's cool to get him exposed. And then Kenny started just shooting off emails to anyone and everyone. And surprisingly, people were like, yeah, we've never heard of a podcast. Come on. So we show up and we're interviewing Harlan Wheatley. And I'm like,
yeah,
God damn, we don't know what, I don't know what to ask Harlan Wheatley, and
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. That was great.
We were like driving up the way there. I'm like sweating bullets, looking at Kenny. What are we going to talk about? We just kind of failed forward and never thought it would be what it is today. But that's kind of the genesis of it all.
Yeah, a lot of different ways I could go with this. When did you guys feel like you were onto something? Like, okay, we've recorded some episodes. When did you feel like, okay, this has legs now?
Well, we recorded probably for about, I don't know, a year, and we weren't getting much traction. And Kenny and I think we had just done a barrel pick and interview at Wild Turkey, and it just wasn't. Kenny was busting butt trying to make it happen. I was busy with work. He's busy with real work, and we're just like, I don't think it's worth it. It's like, this is fun, but we're doing all this stuff for free, driving all over Central Kentucky, back and forth from Louisville, and it's like there's just not seeing the return on investment, and it's like, this is a waste of time. But then we stopped for 2 or 3 weeks, and then people started, tweeting and asking us on Facebook, when's the next episode and whatnot. And so we were like, well, maybe people are interested. And then, then somebody said, why don't you start a Patreon community? And we're like, what's a Patreon community? Patreon had just started.
Yeah.
And then we had people sign up, and we're like, well, maybe this is something, we could do. And then we started to get, a good following on Facebook and all other platforms. And then I think what really like catapulted it was, and like we knew we were onto something, was we did a bourbon community roundtable, which was, it's a monthly show we do with Bourboner, Blake from Bourboner, Breaking Bourbon, and Brian with Sipping Corn.
OGs.
Exactly. And they're great guys. And we all decided to do a barrel pick together at Buffalo Trace. And so we did it, and it sold out like instantly. And so I looked at Kenny, I was like, man, we got to figure out a way to get, this is what people want, is single barrels, access to single barrels. And, seeing that it sold out quickly, then Kenny, like he is, he's a great executor. I give him ideas, and then he just goes and like runs with it. He's great at implementing and executing ideas, whereas I'm a good visionary, but I kind of get distracted easy. But anyways, he reached out to liquor stores and said, here's what we got. We have this community. We think we could do single barrels. And then we partnered with Keg and Bottle to do that. And then that's where it's really catapulted us to where we're on to something. And we built this community about, there are single barrels, but there's more than that. We got, we got our own Discord channel. We got our own community inside Patreon, and it's like turned into this like community, and it's unbelievable what it's turned into. And I'm probably getting too far ahead in the story, but
no, it's great. That does the full development. You guys have talked on the pod about almost hanging it up. Was it purely like what caused you to be like, is this really worth it? Because I mean, if you really love it, that kind of keeps you pushing, and as you said, failing forward. What were the things that were hard that made you be like, I don't like maybe we don't end up doing it before things really start to take off for you? Like what got at you?
So I had been through this. So Kenny, had a comfortable job at, a tech space. You do your work, everything's fine. I had been through a startup, with my own company, and I had been through the same experience. It's hard starting a company because you're going out and you're just trying to convince people to just do business with you or do something with you. And it's like, after a couple years, you get burnt out because you're working so hard, but it's not what you expect it to be. But a lot of people call it the dip. It's like you have this initial excitement, because we're running off adrenaline. You're excited about your new company or, your new venture, and that keeps you going for a year or two. But you got to get through the dip before you can see the hockey stick growth. And
did you read that book?
I did with Seth Godin. Yeah.
Yeah. I love Seth. I love him.
And so we were kind of going through that dip where it was just like, we had some traction, but not really. But I was like, Kenny, I think let's just stick with it, for a little bit longer. And I think, as soon as you think like, because I'd experienced this in my other company, I was like, as soon as you think like you're done, like something will happen. And if it doesn't within 6 months or so, then we need to hang it up. But I think I think we're on to something. I think we just need to ride it out. And we did. And sure enough, that's when the barrel pick happened, and we started that relationship with Keg and Bottle and Patreon. And that's when everything just started, going up from there.
And so let's talk about Fred for a little bit.
Yeah.
My personal knowledge of Fred doesn't extend much beyond my impersonation of Fred. But how did you guys first connect with Fred? And, how was that process of him coming on board and becoming a part owner of the pod? And I mean, that seemed to just kind of happen to the listener. I know you guys had him on for a couple episodes. It's like, oh, now Fred's here and this is a thing, but I'm sure that was a process behind the scenes. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So with my main business is a lawn care company. So I do a lot of people in Louisville, and Fred Minnick was one of my customers.
Nice.
And so one day, I think he had heard me talk or something. He was like, "Where are you from?" I was like, "Bardstown." He's like, "Come inside. I want to show you something." And he showed me, like, I was like, "Holy shit." I never heard of Fred Minnick. I was like, who cares about Whiskey Advocate or, at that time. But anyways, so when we started the podcast, I was like, Kenny, hey, Fred was one of the contacts I knew, because I do like Chris Morris's yard and all these other master distillers. Like, if you looked in my lawn care database, like how many people in the bourbon industry I have, it's pretty crazy. It's over 100 probably.
That's
but anyways,
awesome.
So anyways, I reached out to Fred. I was like, hey, we're starting this podcast. Would you like to come on? He's like, yeah, I'd like to, but he's like, I'm doing this thing at Churchill Downs. I'm interviewing people for this, at the museum, I can't remember what it's called.
Legend series.
Legend series. Yes. Yeah. He's like, why don't you come and record that? So he invited us to record that. Harlan was one of his first people, and we go and we try to record it. We actually didn't record it. We thought we recorded it, but, so anyways, Fred had just kind of stayed close to us and watched us, and he actually approached us. He was like, hey, I've been thinking about starting a podcast on my own, but I really just don't know what to do. I don't know what's involved. And I really love what you all do. And I listen every week, and we're like, really? We didn't, Fred to us was like, this celebrity type, we thought we were just peons, nobody cares about us. And so he approached us, we went to lunch, and we're like, I think this would be a great fit, just to get some legitimacy to who we were. 'Cause he had a great audience. He has, was with Whiskey Advocate at the time. He was writing for Forbes, Wall Street, had the books, and so, he had Bourbon Beyond going on. And so it just made sense for us to add legitimacy to it. And it's been a great addition to the show. I mean, Fred's he gets a lot of shit from people, probably because he wears an ascot and, does all this stuff, but he's one of the most gracious and giving people that you can work with. He's really great, and he's been instrumental to our growth.
Awesome. Yeah, I've heard nothing but good things about people who know Fred personally. Or heard nothing from good. That came out totally wrong. I've heard nothing but good things about
Right.
Fred
No, I knew
from
what you were
people who
going
know
with.
him personally. Yes. So hopefully at some point our paths cross. But yeah, I mean, he's a legend at this point. And, you know, once you gain some kind of notoriety, even if it's generally positive, people start to pick at you a little bit. And I mean, because of his affiliation with San Francisco Spirit Awards and those awards result or impact on certain brands, I mean, he gets a lot of crap. That's probably unwarranted.
Yeah, and immediately when Fred joined the team, like there's a lot of people that wouldn't answer our emails or calls to get on the show, and as
Really?
soon as he was on, they would say yes right away.
Oh, right there.
So,
Oh, so you got that? What you the credibility you were talking about? That really
yeah, and then
he brought that.
you know, and then he was like, "Hey, do y'all want to host like Bourbon Beyond, stuff?" And I'm up on stage interviewing Marion Barnes and John Little from Old Scout and or Smooth Ambler, and they're like arguing about why sourced whiskey is better than starting your own brand but making your own. And I'm like, what the hell? This is so cool. But yeah, it's been a wild ride. So
Awesome. Well, then let's move on. If anybody has any questions specifically for Ryan, make sure you at me so I see it, and then I can throw them in, or we'll come back to them at the end. But for now, we'll shift on to Pursuit Spirits, because doing a pod and then deciding, well, now we're going to build our own brand are slightly different propositions. And one of them is pretty risk-free, doing a pod, doing a Patreon. You can turn it off at any time. There's zero risk involved. Putting up capital, building a brand, insurance. You started your own business before this, and apparently you have multiple businesses. So I don't, you know how hard it is.
Yep.
So what were you thinking? And then we'll get.
I don't think. I guess that's my good and downside is.
Yeah, sure.
I try not to overthink things, but no, the way the brand started was we had reviewed, or on a roundtable, we had talked about a brand like Doc 52 or something. We were like, somebody had sent us a bottle, and we're like, man, it's really good. We don't know who these guys are or whatever, but man, good job. And so we get an email from this guy. He's like, hey, I'm a barrel broker, and I sold the whiskey and helped started that company. Would y'all be interested in working with me? And we're like, maybe, I don't know, and then he's like, well, I'll be in Louisville in a couple weeks, why don't we come have dinner and we'll chat? And I was like, well, what kind of whiskey you got? And he's like, well, I have a lot of aged Tennessee stock in Indiana. And I was like, any Kentucky? He's like, I do, but it's only like €1. And I was like, nope, not interested. So I didn't even want to go to the meeting. And then Kenny's like, hey, texting me. He's like, hey, they're in town. Do you want to go? And it was like a Wednesday night. And I was like, sure, why not? They wanted to take us to Hell or High Water. I hadn't been there. And I was like, sure, I'll go check it out on somebody else's dime. So we sit there and listen, and we talk to him. And, Macaulay, who's with Big River Distilling, was there, and his partner at the time. And I was really intrigued, and they were super smart guys. They knew a ton about the whiskey business and the sourcing side. And they brought some samples with us, and, we were like, I think we could work with this. And so we're like, hey, when you get back, they're from Memphis. I was like, when you get back to Memphis, send us some samples, we'll see if we can try to make something happen out of this, And so they sent us some samples, and Kenny and I were like, Fred had just named like Henry McKenna Whiskey of the Year, and we're like, so we got a bottle of Henry McKenna, and we're like, all right, we're going to blind taste test all these. And if one of them is better than Henry McKenna, then we will do this. So we did it. And sure enough, one of them was, it beat out Henry McKenna, and it later became episode 1. But as soon as we met those guys, all I could think about was, we had interviewed like people like Dixon Deadman, from Kentucky Al, and I'd saw others, make it in the, Drew, they made it, sourcing whiskey, Trey Zoller with Jefferson Reserve. So I'd met all these people, and, I'm like, Well, if they did it, we probably could. We have a small audience. Hey, we're just gonna buy a couple barrels. See where it goes. If not, we're out. You know, $10,000 or whatever.
You can recover. It's not
it
gonna
ended
kill
up being more than that, but at the time, and so, um, yeah, that was just kind of my thinking was like, I think we should do this and try it. I think it'd be cool and fun. So we went to Memphis. We show up and they have a warehouse of 10,000 barrels. And he's like, yeah, whatever you want to try, you can try. It's not like going to a barrel pick where they only have 4 barrels. And it was Tennessee whiskey. So we knew, or Tennessee bourbon, we knew we were like, had a challenge there. Being Tennessee bourbon.
Yeah.
Kentucky,
Public perception. Yeah. Right.
But, there's not much aged Kentucky product. There, some Barton out there, 12-year or 6-year Heaven Hill or stuff like that. But everybody was doing that. And we're like, we don't want to be everybody else. So we thought the Tennessee stuff, now most of it's not great, but we thought we could, because we had the opportunity to pick the barrels ourselves and go through literally 60 barrels a day, that we could, there's surely to God we can find something. And we did. And so the first 9 episodes that we did, well, we started out with 3 episodes. We went down to Memphis. Our thought was to only buy 2 barrels, and then we tried, and we bought 3, and we were freaking out. We're like, oh, how are we gonna pay for this? Like, we gotta get a trademark attorney. They're thousands of dollars. We gotta get TTB approval and all this stuff, and then you're like, gosh, all this. My wife's like, what? This bourbon podcast that didn't make money for years, and now you're starting to own your brand, another brand, and you're like, promise, honey, it's gonna work out, But that's how I got started, and I think now we're on episode 40 of single barrels on the Pursuit series side, and it's wild that it's done so well.
Yeah, I bought episode 3. So I had episode 3, and I loved it. It was so good. That was the one with the tagline, "Welcome to the Creamery."
Yep.
Dude, it was so good. And that one really opened my eyes to the fact that well-aged, undisclosed Tennessee bourbon can be quite lovely. And it really brings this awesome, and people have heard me talk about it all the time, but honey roasted pecans or honey roasted cashew kind of delightfulness. And it was that particular bottle that was like, yeah, there's something here. You just got to look for it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the Tennessee stuff has that prominent vitamin or orange.
It's a candied orange in a I advocate for candied orange when it gets old, but young, it's pretty pronounced. It's chalky. It's pretty Flintstone vitamin. Yeah. I hear it.
Yeah. So we set out to find every barrel that didn't taste like that. And, and so, that's kind of what got started. And then from there Blake was our partner with Sealbox. We had to go with him because he could ship nationwide. We knew we couldn't just sell in Kentucky because our audience is nationwide. So Blake was kind of on the forefront of selling whiskey online and shipping it to certain states that allowed it at the time. But he had done some barrels with Finger Lakes and a couple other distilleries. So we went on this path of like, okay, we can source stuff, but I think it'd be cooler if we started partnering with younger distilleries that are trying to get started, make a name for themselves. And, if we really like their stuff, we could private bottle it and put, our name on it, but we want to highlight them as well because we're not the distillers. We're just picking it, but we thought it could be a win-win. And so episode 10 was our first non-Tennessee bourbon. It was Finger Lakes. It was their wheated mash bill, a 5-year wheated mash bill, and a lot of people enjoyed that one. And then we did a rye with them as well. And then we got a partnership with Woodinville, and then we did another barrel. Episode 17. I'm not supposed to say it, even though it's on the bottle, but I'm not supposed to say it now. I didn't know that at the time, but people know who it's from. So we have a partnership with them. And so, it's been a cool, we try to bring just something unique in the single barrel market. We don't just want to be another 7-year MGP or another 12-year Barton or,
Sure.
something that's on the shelf, or the 15-year Beam stuff that's, those are all great. And, they're great products. That's just not us. We want something that's different and something that's interesting to a whiskey geek.
Nice. So you're cranking out some serious episodes through the single barrel program. And then you decide to shift, not shift because you're still doing your episodes, but then you decide to do the blended product in Pursuit United, which we'll taste here in just a second. But I mean, the cash exposure on that's got to be a little bit higher because you're talking about blend of barrels. How many barrels went into the first batch of the bourbon?
So the first barrel, or the first batch was only 10 barrels,
Okay.
which is still a significant investment.
Yeah, sure.
But when we did it, so our single barrels, we just found out, are a huge pain in the ass. It's like, you got to go pick them, and then you got to create new labels every time. You're waiting on, like, everything in the whiskey business moves at a snail's pace. Like, it's just so busy that everybody's backed up. And so you'll order labels and it takes 8 weeks to get labels. And you're like, I need these like 3 weeks from now. I thought I was early ordering them 3 weeks ago, but anyways, so our broker was like, just kind of pushing us towards doing a small batch. And it's like, yeah, but what do we do it with? And, he had some younger MGP that they had bought, and we're like, I don't think so. But then he had this, stuff from Tennessee, that was not Dickel, that had just turned like 3.5, and he's like, I think you all will think this is really interesting. We're like, yeah, whatever, you're just trying to sell us. So we went and tried it, and we're like, holy cow. At 3.5 years old, it had a ton of good flavors, ton of depth, a lot of oak, and I was like, gosh, I think we can make something work with this. And then we had a relationship with Finger Lakes, and I was like, well, so I sent Brian McKenzie a message, and I'm like, hey, what do you have to work with up there? I think because the Tennessee stuff was good, but there was other distilleries that are using it, and I just thought it was missing something. Like it had a lot of good stuff I thought was missing, and I really like the Finger Lakes product because it has this like fruitiness and chocolatiness to it that you don't get out of. So I sent them a message like, what do you got? So he sent me some samples, and then I started blending them two together, and I had what we thought was a pretty good blend. But it was missing the KY component. It's like, here we go again. We're Kentucky boys selling Tennessee and New York whiskey. That doesn't sound very cool. So, we had some barrels we had some Kentucky barrels that were 5 years old. But we're just like, it's just not working. So we tried some 6-year-old. We tried the 12-year-old Barton blend. And since Brian was great in helping me, giving me feedback on, he's got one of the best palates and noses I've been around. I mean, he's up there with, I watch his reviews and I'm like, he should be doing our reviews. But anyways, I was missing that Kentucky opponent. I just wasn't loving, what was available on the market. And then for some reason, I was like spraying a lawn one day and it just popped in my head. And I was like, wait a minute, BBC, they've been distilling for so long. I bet they got something that's about to turn 4. And so I called Kenny up and I was like, what do you think? And he was like, well, send a message. So I sent Dan, who was head of hospitality at the time.
Danny Calloway.
Yes.
Yep.
And I was like, hey, we got this project going on. We really want a KY to component, but we can't find it. He's like, yeah, come on down. So we come and, John and Steve Nally come meet us, and they're like, here's all our mash bills. Here's what's going to turn 4, and, pick something you like. And so we found one, and I was like, gosh, this is, we put it in our blend, and I was like, this is perfect. It gives it that like Kentucky feel that it was missing. It gives that like brown sugar, buttery, caramel, vanilla notes that it was just kind of missing with the other two components. And so, then that was so we blended those 3 together. You blend them in 50 milliliter, 100 milliliter, samples, and you're like, that tastes great. But then when you're like, all right, it's time to go dump 10 barrels, and you're like, all right, I got $40,000 in whiskey.
Please work, man.
You're like, God, I hope this works. So the first batch, it was funny. They had dumped them, and we were like, hey, can you send us a bottle to, we want to take pictures for our website and whatever. And they were like, yeah, sure. So they dumped it that day. They filled a bottle, sent it back to us. So we took pictures, our designer taking pictures and all this and stuff. And then like 2 weeks later, like Kenny's like, all right, they've done everything you need to with it. Let's try it. And I was like, oh God, here we go. So we open it up and I smell it. And I was like, this is not what I blended in the 100 milliliter, samples. It's not, it's some of the component, but it doesn't taste there. And so I'm like, oh no, we're in like, so we're texting, we're like, Kenny's devastated. I'm devastated. We're like, we're in damage control now. Like, God, how are we going to sell these bottles? Like, we're going to just tell people, hey, this is our first attempt at blending. Like, just grow with us. We made not that we made a mistake, but it turned out good in the samples, but not good on a big scale. But we promise the next one will be better. But so Lauren was like, why don't you call them and see, how long it sat before they sent it to him? And so we call our bottler and they're like, oh, literally, we just dumped it, filled a bottle and sent it to you. We're like, okay. And they're like, I think it's really good. We'll send you another bottle. I think you're going to like it. So they sent us one that had been fatted for 2 weeks. We got it back. And as soon as I smelled it, I was like, yes, that's it. That's what we wanted. So we were just like, all right, let's get as many samples out, send it all over and whatnot. So that's kind of how the first batch went of United.
Awesome.
I know I kind of rambled all over the
that
place.
That was perfect. No, thank you
great.
so much. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. So let's taste it.
Yeah,
go ahead, Brian.
While we're tasting too, I was gonna say while we're tasting, we can talk about this too. Like that's interesting insight. Like, is that typical of other companies like doing blends? Is there a certain vat time that they like try to adhere to before bottling? Like that's something I've not really heard anyone talk about.
Yeah, us either. And so, a lot of companies do about a week. Some do, we had talked to Lisa with Widow Jane, and she said they do 3 weeks. And our bottler is like, no way, we're not going to let it sit here for 3 weeks. Yeah, so most of them are like 7 to 10 days, but some can be longer just depending on who's doing it. But the first batch I think was about 10 days. It said in a tank before it was bottled. And everybody has their different things, but that's what we went to do the next batch, and we're like, whatever you did the first time, do it again.
The same thing. So what we're tasting now is this batch 1.
Actually, no, you were drinking batch 2. You are lucky.
All right.
Yeah. So we just got batch 2, which I think is a little better because of all we've been in a supply chain issue like anyone else. This was supposed to be out in March, but because of bottles and glass and labels and whatnot, we're been delayed. And we're hoping that it'll be in stores in about 2 to 3 weeks, but who knows? It's out of our control. So.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. All right. Well, let's nose this sucker, and then we'll lay down some nostril notes, and then we'll taste it. Brian, you've been snorting it for a while.
Yeah.
What have I immediately? So I'm.
It's got something in. I could be wrong on some of this, but I had a little bit of I say fortune. When I went and got these samples, Ryan let me try the components, at least core components, maybe not the exact components, but some of the components of these, and I was able to taste the distillate that was on its own. Now I didn't take notes or ever there. We're just hanging out enjoying, but immediately on the nose, what I notice is it's not dusty like in an old dusty sense, but I feel like it's dusty in like it's relaxed. It's got there's something about that has a brightness that isn't specifically citrus. It isn't specifically youth. It just has a brightness, but I feel like that's something that you notice a little bit in older whiskeys. And that is mixed with like a florality, like a subtle florality that doesn't pinpoint any specific note. But again, these kind of fragrant notes are something that I feel like are missing a lot in younger whiskey. It's just like it's just something that used to be there and like older whiskey tells. So I have that, and then it moves into like cinnamon icing. I say that because it's not like dry cinnamon. It's soft. It's inviting. It's just a subtle layer that's in there. It's a little bit of vanilla, and the more I nose it, the more it kind of comes into with some like nice, like soft, easy caramels as well.
Yeah, I got I had some burning wood, but it was kind of spicy. Reminded me of mesquite a little bit, which I like. I mean, I like that I'm getting not fresh wood on blended product. We're totally going to use the word craft, but in a non-offensive way. In any blended non-large distiller product, I'm stoked to not get very, very raw wood.
There is one craft distiller. I don't think the other two you can consider craft.
True.
How much juice they're pumping out, but
yeah, probably not. But I mean, BBC is still so young, though. Like, even though they're cranking out some massive quantities of juice, they're still a young operation.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I think this is some of the oldest distillate you'll have of theirs. So, yeah, and it, with these three components, it took me, gosh, I don't know, because we're whiskey geeks and we're in the whiskey community and all this stuff. Kenny and I were not gonna, and Fred's not a part of this. It's just Kenny and I. This is all separate, but we just weren't gonna put something out, and people just rag on it on the forums. I'm too insecure. I didn't know how insecure I was until I started blending whiskey. So this took me about, I don't know, 6 to 8 months to refine and get it the way but I'm glad you said it reminds you of a Dusty, because I'm a huge Dusty fan, and that's one thing I wanted, in this was because a lot of those Dusty whiskeys are for, to 6-year-old whiskeys or bourbons back in the day. So a lot of people rag on 4-year product because it's young, but that's what they used to do back in the day. So there's something to it. If you have good distillate, you can make it work.
Yeah. What we say at Stone Creek, the coffee company I work at, is the cup always wins. Like, the age is a barometer for quality. It's not a KPI. The KPI is ultimately what you taste in the glass.
Yep, for sure.
I also got some maraschino cherry, some like dark molassesy. This is like a little molassesy sweet funk, and then some cherry, but not like bright fresh cherries. We're talking about some marinated maraschino stuff in there. I get some perfume too. So as I hit that just now, I got a heavy floral that just popped on me, and it's sweet. It's not grandma. It's not too rosy. It's a very sweet floral. I can't name the flower though.
Yeah, it's like a honeysuckle or kind of orange lemon type thing going. Brian's probably better at describing. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna put it in my mouth now. While you talk, Brian. You talk and I'm tasting.
No, it's fine. I mean, Orange Blossom's pretty close. So what I think about, there's it is kind of hard to describe, but we were I was digging in like the Le Nez du Café, the coffee sensory kit as well. And then also trying out some seasonal drinks this week, where someone was doing I think a rose lavender latte or something like that. So it was, two floral tones, two perfumey floral tones on top of each other. I thought it would be a little overpowering. There's something about this that does kind of hit on the rose a little bit, but it's not as grandma-y. Rose to me is usually pretty grandma.
Yeah, pretty grandma. So just initial reactions, I'm going to go back for notes, but really sweet, which I like. Is this a 4-grain, Ryan?
It is not. So you got 2 high rye bourbons in there, and then a wheated bourbon too, to finish it off. So you got a high rye bourbon from Tennessee, a high rye bourbon from BBC, and then a wheated bourbon from New York.
So 4 grains.
3. Well, I guess 4. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
corn. Yeah, that's what I should have just said. Is there a rye product and a wheated product?
Yeah.
Get so the weeded part, I think, hit me on the finish and was reminiscent of like a Weller 107 finish, which I love Weller 107. And it's I mean the aromatics remind me of maple. So this spicy up front, maple on the finish. I'll go back and dissect it again. But with that heavy sweetness, it's really good because I like the sweetness. I like the layers, the transition, the whiskey journey going from spice to sweet, or sweet to spice, back to sweet. I'm just being overly elaborate right now. Brian, what are you pulling out? And then I'll throw down some actual notes.
Yeah, so one thing I appreciate, I mean, your mention to 107 is interesting, but it's different than that because 107, I feel like Trails specifically, it's a little more singular in its spice, and it's usually cinnamon. This is a little fuller amount of spice, like it's more baking spices or whatever to it that has a little more dimension to it after it finishes. You know, to me, this note reminds me of like a French oak finished whiskey. It's got this like really sweet honey graham cereal, but it's not grainy. It's not.
I'm here for that.
So
yeah.
Like a profile this makes me think of is like, you know, Starlight has they'll do a French oak thing, but you notice the graininess. And one thing that is, you might have to remind me on the ages that are in here, but I don't drink this and think of age. I think of this and I get like a really well done sweetness. The thing that makes me fearful of saying maple is sometimes when I hear maple, I think artificially sweet. I feel a little too fakely sweet, but it is a sweet profile. It gets in these honeygram notes that are like chewy, dense, like just rich sweetness with this like beautiful trailing spice to it that is holistic to the pour.
See, I can listen to him just talk all day.
It's got like a grassiness to it that like kind of chimed into what you called mesquite, Drew.
Yeah.
On the nose, it's like it mixes in, but it comes off a little bit more grassy. I love finding grassy characteristics in whiskey because one of my favorite older memories of Al Young, I went and when I took my dad, it's also a sweet memory of my dad because he's not doing too well. But, you know, I took him to the Four Roses event when the Small Batch Select came out and Al Young was there. And I brought my Al Young so that he could sign it while I was there. And hearing his wife talk about him in regards to that, and then hearing him talk about the flavors that he pulls out of the whiskey. Sometimes when you get into flavors or when you are comparing bottle to bottle, sometimes you forget that you're taking grains that are native to areas and what they come out to be sometimes in a bottle are snapshots of like real growth, real seasons, real environmental things. And so I love a whiskey that brings that back. And so when I can get into like some grassy flavors, some floral flavors and stuff like that, to me, that is a sign of a whiskey that it is pure on the bottling, that shows pureness on where it was grown. And I think that's something that isn't really talked about a whole lot. Anyway, that was really long-winded, but
no, it's
it
fine.
has this kind of grassy, perfumey characteristic to the palate that it's one of those things that reminds me of Al, which I would think would have reminded him of like why people make whiskey.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and so with this, you know, it is. I think you were talking about ages. There's, you know, the Tennessee and Kentucky are 4 years. The Kentucky is 4 year in like a day. Like as soon as it turned 4, we were like, dump it, just because we're ready. But and then the New York is 5. Yeah, we, you know, this whole project, this is something that we wanted to try to, you know, we have different batches, but they're all going to be, you know, these 3 same mash bills and distillates. Yeah. And so we wanted to make it a consistent product. You know, it's priced at $65, which, you know, I don't want to say it's an everyday pour, but we wanted it's something to be where you can grab it and not feel like you're not breaking the bank to do it. It's something that you could enjoy every day as a whiskey geek or something, to get a lot of unique flavors,
Yeah.
pulled out I wanted something that was a good value, that you could drink this, and something interesting that you could have other whiskey geeks and be like, try this, it's like something different. And, we're trying to be in that, New Riff, Wilderness Trail, Rabbit Hole kind of as our main competition, because we'll never be able to, because we're sourcing and, and we are contract distilling now, but, this is as low as a price point we could get, to make it a win-win for everybody, unfortunately. But we'll never be able to compete with Old Forester or Brown or, Heaven Hill and offer a 8 to 12 year bourbon for $40. Wish we could, but I really thought that we could offer. This gave us the opportunity to offer something so unique in that price range that doesn't break the bank.
Yeah. And so just after letting it evolve, like the sweetness that we talked about, there's the viscosity too. Neither one of us really mentioned, well, you probably did, Brian, because you mentioned 1,000 things, but the viscosity is pretty killer. Like it's creamy. It's not terribly effervescent. Like hairspray is note I'll use on a lot of young whiskeys that just don't feel like they have substance. They don't have oil. They don't have like fat extraction from wood. Not that there's fats in woods, but viscosity is a big thing I look for in a quality whiskey. And so the sweetness with the viscosity, the balance of sweet and spice, it's really special, dude. Like I'm sure you are proud, but you should be. It's quite good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like I said, I didn't know how insecure I was until you start blending whiskey and send it out to the market. But Kenny and I have been both. I did a lot of the blending, but Kenny has one of the tougher palates like out there. He is like so tough to like please. And so I had him checking me, and then I had people like Brian, I had Drew Colesveen, I had Fred Minnick, I had Blake, Brian, all just testing each blend and telling me, it's missing this or that. It's kind of crazy how like this whole thing we built with the podcast and the community that Kenny and I and Fred have built around us, they all like were there to support me and Kenny through this and help us get to where we are today. So it's like we took everything we learned through the podcast, and put it in, and this is a representation of that in this blend. It's like we were able to like cherry pick what we liked about each distillery and everything, and this is a representation of that.
That's awesome. So
there's the more I sip on it, it's got even that kind of fragrant, like, did I say fragrant or flagrant? Either way, it's fragrant. Finished like a dusty. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
When you like get to the bottom of a dusty and you're like, oh, that is slightly perfumey. Like it doesn't taste perfumey through the pour, but when I get to I poured some and then I had to re-pour, and both times I got to the bottom, I'm like, it has that like slightly floral, dusty thing.
There's tons
of
of
thing where you're like,
oh,
that's why
flavors.
I like dusties.
Exactly.
Which is, I had no disadvantage, Drew. While I tasted the three separate, I even told it to Ryan. I was like, okay, I see this, but like, I can see why you would want to add something to it because of this. And I tried the other thing. I'm like, okay, this is interesting, but like, maybe it will add blank. But I never tried them together. So
it's
cool.
So this was your first go at it?
Yeah.
Nice.
Which doesn't remind me necessarily of the three.
He had a couple of the early iterations, which had the Barton and the Heaven Hill.
Mm-hmm.
And they were okay. They were good, but I felt like, that BBC component, even though it was young, Brian had it on its own. It's fantastic, on its own. But they all three were missing something, but they all three together are like perfect. And I'm not to say it's the perfect whiskey. No. There's still, there's still some slight youth notes to it. And our goal is to make it a 6-year product. We have, long term, we have contracts with each distillery. We're laying down 1,000 barrels a year total.
Wow, dude, let's go. That's big time. Right.
So our goal is to.
We're not talking about 10 barrels and 40.
No, that's a
$50 an hour or
much
whatever.
bigger investment.
Yeah, it is. I try not to think about it, but I have confidence in it, and the people that have been around us tell us we should be confident in it, but you never know. So, but
yeah, well, keep doing the thing, and with the contacts, the relationships you guys have, what you built, in your you own a marketing network, that's helpful. So I'd say you're off to a pretty good start.
We're extremely blessed. Like I don't take it for granted at all. I always say this all the time. It's like the support we have just in the whiskey community is unbelievable. But yeah, it's still is scary, laying down that much cash and that much, because bourbon's hot now, but you hope it will be in 4 or 5 years.
Sure.
But between now and then, we have secured enough aged distillate to where we can do 10,000 bottles per year for the next 3, and then once we hit year 4, we'll be able to elevate it to, like, I want to say it's like 30,000 is what it jumps up to, and then our goal in 9 years is to have 200,000 bottles.
Wow,
it's kind of our scale point where I think we can cap. But people are telling us we should go beyond that. But I'm like, no. I'm conservative. That's good. But yeah, we've had a great response. We've had great partners, to retail stores that have loved the product and they want more of it. So
yeah,
we're excited about it.
Well, and so you talked about the bourbon. You talked about like where it's up against in the market. You talked about where that's coming from. But we also are lucky enough that, like you mentioned, we're some of the first 2 who have this rye. So, let talk a bit about this rye. Go, where, what made you all say? I mean, it seems like it could be easy to be like, well, we have a bourbon, now we have to have
let's
rye.
focus on the
talk
bourbon.
a little bit about the rye. Let's go.
So we came up with this. Somebody said you got to do a rye, and I was like, okay, well, who do we get it from? I love Wilderness Trail rye, but rightfully so, they weren't willing to, sell us any because they need it all for themselves, and I didn't want to wait, 3 or 4 more years for it. But yeah, so we had tried, I think it was Chicken Cock, like a 2-year rye that BBC had done. And I was like, this is 2 years, it's really good. And so we talked to them, and they're like, yeah, we have, our own 95.5 rye. And I was like, same thing. It's really good, but it's missing something. I think we need some more age. And who else is out there on the, on the rye game that we could get some aged distillers from that's not MGP? Because MGP is great and the 95.5 rye is awesome, but
everybody's doing it.
You can go get it, any way you want. So with us, we're just always trying to offer something unique. And so BBC, or Susie, who we work with there, she's like, you should really reach out to Sagamore up in Maryland. Their distillate's about to turn 4. They've been sourcing MGP, but their stuff's about to turn 4, and we think it's really good. You should call them. So I had a buddy in Dallas, Brian Lowe, who's with the Dallas Bourbon Club. He had, when I was there doing an event for Pursuit Spirits, he had introduced me to a Sagamore rep. And I was like, hey, do you have that Sagamore contact? Yada, yada. And he got me with the CEO, Brian Tracy, and we were on a phone call, and I was like telling him what we did with the bourbon. The bourbon hadn't released yet, but I'd send him a sample, and he's like, yeah, this is really good. And he's like, we love what you all do. We'd love to work with you. They're doing 2 different distillates. They have a 95.5 Maryland rye, and then they have a 52% rye that they're blending together 50-50. And so we have those 2 distillates plus the BBC, which is 3 years now. So we have the Sagamore's 4 years, and then the BBC is 3 years. And so I worked on a blend that was different from what Sagamore was offering, and I didn't want, with most rye blends, you get like strong spearmint, pickly kind of notes. So I wanted something that wasn't that. And so that's with those 3 blends. Got to work and fine tuned it, and that's where it's at. What
All right.
you are tasting?
Sweet.
I don't
Real
even
quick.
have any more at my house. I gave you the last of it.
Wow. Thanks,
I'd love
man.
to drink it with you.
I'll bring it back. I'll bring the little bit that I got back.
No, you don't have to. We're about to go up there in July and go taste through some barrels to pick out for the blend, because they had just sent us some barrels. So we're gonna go pick them out, and then we're also laying down new make with them and stuff for the future as well.
Real quick, Brian. You were at 9:30. I don't want to take too much of your time. And I don't know what Brian told you. How long are you with us for tonight? I really don't want to keep you longer. You've been generous.
Oh, whatever y'all need. I mean, as long I got another 30 minutes probably.
Yeah, that's normally what we go till 10. But didn't want to assume. Some folks have been like, well, I got an hour. Like, oh yeah, that's fair. That's a lot of time. All right, we'll taste this and then we'll hit you with our finishing questions here. Brian, what do you have on the nose?
I feel like you should go first because I don't want you to yell at me for having a lot of notes.
No, I wasn't yelling. I was remarking. I also had a very long and wandering summary of what I was feeling about that bourbon.
My
lemongrass, I'll say that, and candied lemons.
It's right
big
here.
citrus.
It's right here. Lemongrass and lemon oil. They're 2 of my notes on here. Which
I love in a rye. So let me be clear. I understand. I also love dill. So I know you said, Ryan, you weren't wanting to do dill, but I'm okay with the dill as long as it's not playing first fiddle. I don't mind a dill note in a rye. And spearmint, I actually can like quite a bit too if it's a sweet spearmint. That said, neither one of those is evident on the nose. Maybe a suggestion of more of a peppermint. Less spearminty.
I think it's winter mint.
Winter green.
Winter mint. I love it. The orbit.
It's not
gum.
spearmint. It's not.
It's hard to get any rye without mint. It's kind of like part of being a rye is that it's going to have some level of mintiness.
Totally, but some of those 95.5 MGP ryes are just like spearmint bombs where it's like piney and it's all you get is pine, lemon, and spearmint, and dill.
Yeah, well, again, I don't hate those. Like I've got
no, and they're great. I'm not saying they're bad, or I just wanted something different,
This is a Wisconsin rye. That's juniper berries all over it. Almost reminds me of a gin. It's quite good, but it's very, very unique. It reminds me of a gin almost, a well-aged gin, which doesn't exist but should.
I do have a sample of their 95% rye Maryland one, so I'll drink that with y'all.
Sweet.
But what I liked about the Sagamore stuff was it had like this grape and brown sugar note that I don't get a ton on other ryes.
Yeah, we'll have to wait. Go ahead.
No, that's what really gravitated me towards using theirs as the 2 primary ingredients in this.
Fruitiness on the nose, I get more apple, like Honeycrisp apple, nice sweet. The candied lemon, which we mentioned, lemongrass, so it's the sprouts that they toss over, like a pad thai. All right,
pad thai is amazing. The first note that I had was a melon candy, which it sounds kind of weird, but like there's a note that used to be in an old soda, and Coke products made it was mellow yellow melon, and mellow yellow melon was the jam. Okay, I liked mellow yellow. I'd always bike up to the gas station when they had mellow yellow melon. They took it away. I went to Disney World, went to Epcot, MGM, wherever it was, Epcot, and in Germany, you could still try a soda that was melon flavored. Lo and behold, they have now come out with I don't know maybe it's Mountain Dew something or whatever, but there's another melon flavor. It is back again in a different brand, and that kind of candied melon sweetness is in here. The more you sip on it, the more it goes away, and it comes into these like caramel and barrel char notes. So it definitely evolves a lot from pour, sitting with it, and continuing to waft it over the nose. You go from orange soda and melon to caramel and barrel char. Yeah, I'm gonna taste it.
Yeah, taste is great. So you know how you make a powdered sugar icing with you just add a little lemon, you mix it up with powdered sugar, and then you can dump it over a bundt cake and it gets hard. It kind of forms an icing. So that's the sweetness I get out of that. Powdered sugar and citrus. And then I see when you mentioned grape soda, like that kind of artificial grape, which is not a bad thing. It's a wonderful thing. Grape soda is
like
the
a
best
Kool-Aid
soda.
grape, like
Yeah,
powdery,
right.
powder you get.
Yeah, so I definitely picked that up. I don't know if I would have if you didn't say anything, but it's there for sure. Suggestive tasting is a thing, and it's not a bad thing.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah,
if you tell me something's in, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right.
No doubt. Brian, what are you pulling?
Well, there's
I'm getting some licorice too, actually. Big licorice on the nose now that I come back to it.
You might. Do you have a rare breed rye around you?
I do. I've got one right behind me.
Profile wise, it kind of most immediately reminded me of rare breed rye. But what I like about both these pours, if this proof is right, is this proof right on this bottle 122 proof?
Nope, they're both 108. So
got it. I was gonna say it's definitely very easy.
Yeah. So
to drink. I was like, if that's 122 proof, man, that is smooth.
Yeah. So the Pursuit United, the bourbon was just pure luck. Like that was like I got it to where I liked it, and then I didn't have a hydrometer, so I go to Drew and take samples to him. Like, can I put this in your hydrometer? And it came out at 108. And then some people, like when we released the bourbon, they're like, it's perfectly proofed, don't change, And then so I was like, well, I guess we got to do the rye the same proof.
You got to release it where it's good.
Yeah, but it actually turned out that way. As we did it, 110, 105, 120, and 108 seemed to be, perfectly, like you talked about 107. That's one of my favorite, everyday whiskeys. Not that it's everyday anymore, but it's, to me, it's perfectly balanced and proofed at 107. I think Weller full proof is fine. It's Weller 12 is okay, but 107 is like the sweet spot.
Yeah, I prefer 107 to 12. I've actually never had, I don't think I've had full proof. Somebody said they were going to send me a sample, but did not, which is fine. Nobody owes me anything. Interesting nose on this. After hitting the rare breed, then coming back to this, I get like a black pepper and teriyaki, like when you pop open a beef jerky bag.
I like beef jerky.
Yeah, I like beef jerky too. I'm not
beef jerky.
Yeah.
Which is, I didn't expect that after the candied lemon, but the rare breed nose is so bright. Like it's all, which I was surprised when I got that. I was like, that is not at all what I expected from rare breed. Is all the notes are light, even on the palate. So in comparison, rare breed maybe is a touch sweeter than this, but go ahead.
Well, yeah, rare breeds like I call them gateway ryes. They're like the Kentucky ryes. They're 50, 2%. Which is in this blend, but there's 2 95.5s. So, definitely rare breed's probably gonna be more of that bourbon-esque, sweeter nose and flavor profile that you get more bourbon notes because there's a higher corn percentage in those.
Well, that's what I thought, but at the same time, it's still all light notes. Like I just expected more depth and even more caramelized sugars out of the rare breed than what I got. Like out of these two, I'm not blowing smoke, dude. I prefer yours. Like I feel like it has more complexity on the flavor. I do get very sweet candy cane, 100%, like peppermint candy cane, candied lemon, carries through from the nose into the palate.
I know. I wish I was trying it with you all. I just have the.
Yeah, and I mean it just feels really well balanced. Like I feel like I could drink a decent amount of this. The sweetness isn't maybe as heavy on the palate as I got on the nose. It is lighter. It's not in the mapley, brown sugar, dark stuff like I was getting out of the bourbon, but powdered sugar. I mean, it's enough sweetness to be like, oh yeah, it's there. And it just is a really, really nice rye.
Yeah, the thing I loved about it was, a lot of you all talked about the bright fruits, the grape note, a little bit of hint of bright brown sugar that, whatever you talk about, the lemon crust or whatever. Yeah, that's what I loved about it. Instead of just being like this spearmint, bomb, which
Mhm.
I love those, but
Mhm.
this was something that is just something interesting. You can say, hey, I know you've had rye, but try this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I like about the other day I did a video and I tried the Michter's Barrel Strength Rye. I'm trying to remember what the L were. Michter's Barrel Strength, the Nashville Barrel Company small batch, the Pikesville, the Elijah Craig, and the Rare Breed. And doing something like that, you can see how different a whole bunch of rye taste. And so even just now, so I, earlier today I was drinking Peerless, so I was like, well, let me try this Peerless single barrel. And you notice the uniqueness that it has, and then
Yep.
noticing that kind of melon note in here, I was like, well, let me try the Nashville Barrel Company. It's 95.5. It's 100 proof, so closer to where you're at. And I remember having some of those fruit notes, but it's definitely more on the spicier note. What's nice about your product, I would hope you would think too, is it has a place. It's not necessarily like the same flavor profile that something else has. You have a rye that, from trying these two just now while we're talking, and then even in memory from the other ones I just had in that video, you have another one that could go in a flight like that too, and it stands its own. And it's going to be a profile that somebody hits and says, "This is my jam."
Yeah.
And that
others
I'm
that will
glad you
just
said
that will
that.
just notice the differences of that.
And that's totally what I was going for. Like because we had to get Sagamore on all these, I've had to get each distillery's approval,
Yeah.
And when I sent them, they were like, well, when we sent you, our blend, we thought it was going to taste a lot like ours, but it's totally different and unique, and it's so good. They're like, can we
Yeah, I
steal it? And
like
I'm like,
Sagamore
nope.
stuff, and this doesn't taste like that. So
Yeah, well, have you had? Because Sagamore has only released MGP stuff. This is their own distillate. It's not MGP.
that's right. Yeah, so
And
I don't think I've had any of their stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that's what I went for. Was like, it may not be everybody's jam, but it's going to be something different, and that's what the bourbon was too. I was like, and a lot of people have liked it, but some people have said, it's just too way out there. But when you're selling a 4-year bourbon, you got to make something unique.
Yeah. I didn't feel like either one of these was like just completely off the radar. Like, oh, I've never had anything like it. Like, I think it stands, out on the shelf relative. I mean, I mentioned Weller 107, which you can't get. Like,
right.
Maybe some of the Maker's special releases like have a similar mouthfeel and finish to what I had out of the bourbon. It does tend to speak to me more from a wheated perspective than a rye whiskey perspective. Like, I'd recommend it to somebody who really likes wheaters. I'm like, oh, you should get the Pursuit United Bourbon, this batch too. I think you'll really like it.
It's crazy how much. So that's the thing with blending. What makes it so difficult is that a little can change the profile so drastically. And so, like, it's amazing what how much influence that wheated bourbon does to the whole profile when you throw it in there. And like, if you do too much, it throws it way this way. If you do too little, it's way this way. And it's like, it's crazy, like how just a few milliliters here and there will just throw a blend like to drinkable to undrinkable.
Sure.
Wow.
Yeah, I've been wanting to do a little bit more playing with blending just recreationally with the bottles I have open. I've got a couple I'm going to drop on a video here soon, but I even in my little tweaks, it is pretty bonkers how just a little bit of that and a little bit of this can change your dram pretty significantly. I can only imagine how much vatting and dumping full barrels. You mentioned the anxiety behind that.
Yeah, it's straight panic mode. You're like,
yeah. All right. Well, we'll move on from the tasting, which certainly thank you for the samples. They were great. Yeah, certainly appreciate that. And Squad Nation, remember, Ryan said that the bourbon will be very available through Blake's website, Seal Box. So that's a place where you're going to go to get the Pursuit United Bourbon Batch 2. Is the rye going to be available too there?
Yeah, so the bourbon will be Sealbox will have it, and then we're also going to be in Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, and Texas,
Oh,
and
okay, great.
Illinois now. Illinois just picked up.
Sweet.
We have a ton of states that want us. We just don't have enough product right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're not in any of those states, you'll have to go to Sealbox and hope they ship to you. But the rye will be in Sealbox and then those other states as well. But the rye, the first batch, unfortunately, we could only get enough to do 2,000 bottles, and that will be in October. But next year will be a bigger release of 10,000 for next year.
Great. Awesome. Well, a couple of wrap up questions here, Ryan. How many businesses is it you do own? Like, because with the podcast and now the whiskey line and then your lawn business, do you own more than that? Because it seems like there have been other things.
So I have 4. So I have the lawn care, I have a mosquito and pest control company, and then I have, Bourbon Pursuit with the podcast, and then Pursuit United. So there's 4 different businesses there, and then I have twins and a wife, and so every night I lay my head down and I'm like, what did I do today? You know.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a unique person that can balance all of that and not lose their mind. How do you sleep at night?
Poorly. It's tough. I've had to do a lot of work on. You have these things, these interests that grasp you and consume you, and I've had to work a lot on balancing that with home life and kids and family and spirituality and a wife, and so I do try to put a lot of effort in. Have a morning ritual where I read the Bible and try to take the wisdom from that and put those lessons into my life and let that guide me. It's not easy because all this stuff consumes me and I'm passionate about it, and workaholism is a thing, and I can fall subject to it, and I can put my worth into it. And so I have to recognize that and try to stop and smell the roses. But, but I have so much fun doing it all. And, but that's the hard part, is finding the balance, but I'm getting better at it. And it's all a journey and a process.
Yeah. Yeah. So jumping right off of that, is that the question that my favorite question to answer, and this is really why I love to do this podcast, is learning so much about people. But I love to ask this question because it's deeply existential. And that is, how do you define purpose in the midst of all that you have going on? When you get up in the morning and you're like, okay, I'm going to approach my day. What makes you feel like, okay, that was worth it?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's tough, early in my career, it was all about making a name for myself, making money, doing all that stuff. But, you'll find, I've had a lot of success and a lot of accomplishments. It's no better once you've arrived than when you're getting there. So I try to just enjoy the process. And like I said, I put a lot of faith in my faith, and, I put a lot in scripture and word. And so, Jesus talks about, creating, heaven and whatnot, not only in the afterlife, but here on earth. So my goal is like, how can I make somebody's day to experience heaven here on earth? And so it's just about people, and the people I meet through the podcast, through barrel picks, through my customers, through my family, my relationships. It's like, how can I, make, because this world is chaos. It's like every day it's trying to take you down. And so it's like, how can I provide some kind of
kingdom realities?
Here on earth. And so I think it's a real thing. And it took me a long time to figure that out. But, that's been my goal and purpose here. I've kind of discovered that over the past few years. And it's kind of really helps make things, so if a batch, of bottles and boxes don't show up on time, before I blow up and freak out, where it's okay now, it's
sure,
it is what it is. It's like, how can I just wake up, be better every day, and make the people I'm around better, and that's my purpose now. So.
I appreciate that. And honestly, that's one of the reasons I was so jacked to talk to you. I heard you talking on one episode of some podcast somewhere where you mentioned your faith. And I was like, hey, we have that in common.
Well, and it's hard to say that because some people probably automatically dismiss you. And understandably, there's a lot of baggage that because I was a skeptic too, but there's been a lot of growth and wisdom I've grown to learn out of that. So
I mean there's there's I mean there's a lot of when somebody says it too, there's a lot of like, well, that's interesting, but you want to know about the person, you want to know how they live and what they believe. And I just appreciate the openness about it. That's something I've tried to bring through my channel is like, listen, you are who you are, like, and you have something to contribute to the world regardless of what your particular worldview is. So it doesn't really help people to beat around the bush. It helps to like own like what you think the human condition is, because then we can talk about it and we can try to work together and be like, okay, that's an interesting perspective. Let's talk about that. Versus just ignoring the problems that are clearly evident in human beings. Like it's evident we got problems and we need solutions. So let's try and find out what they are. And I'll share my perspective and hopefully that is impactful for you. And I want you to share yours with me because then I can wrestle with that and we can talk through it and try and like deal with the reality of what we experience and try and figure out what's the best path forward here. So thank you for sharing so transparently. Thank you for telling your story. That was awesome. I just had so much fun chatting with you, listening, and hopefully Nation right hand this time did as well. Any parting thoughts, questions, Brian? You good? Anything you have for Ryan before we let him off here?
I'm just super thankful that Ryan was able to take some time with us today, not only to share the awesome stuff that that the Pursuit United series is doing, but just to get a little peek behind him. Again, at least in my perspective, I admire the conversations I'm able to have with Ryan, obviously off camera stuff, just like to get to know him. I'm always appreciative for his humbleness, especially as someone who is still part of some things making strides in whiskey. We know that Kenny is like a mover and a shaker, and I appreciate Ryan's steadfastness and humility through it all and being accessible and jumping on the chat with us today.
Oh yeah. And I'll have to say, if it weren't for Kenny, I probably wouldn't be here because I would have been onto something else. Kenny is he's one of the, like I said, he's one of the smartest, and like he's just so good at executing, and he's such a great person too. Like I hope that doesn't get lost in all the TikTok and all the posts and stuff. Somebody's got to put us out there, and and because it's not gonna be me. I forget about it. I'm out staring at grass and birds and whatever.
So be mowing Bourbon Pursuit in your yard.
Yeah. So we have 3 great, actually 4. Now we have Lauren. We have 4 great team members, and it takes us all. And and our community is what really pushes us forward, and it's what we show up for. It's like them being there and just keeping us going. It's all unbelievable. And I know I say this all the time, so people probably just might not take it seriously, but I do just don't take it for granted. I'm so thankful and appreciative of it all. Really.
Sweet. Are you familiar with the Enneagram, Ryan?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Is Kenny a 3?
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's what I'm talking about.
Heck yeah.
All right. Yeah. So we'll have Kenny.
I'm a 3 and a 9, I think.
So to hear
or something, I think,
yeah,
I don't know.
9s and 3s have an interesting relationship. I think a 9 goes to a 3 in health. So to listen to the way you behave sort of naturally, given the fact that you're an entrepreneur and you have 4 businesses, there's probably more 3 in there than 9. But it's probably when you get tired, you go to 9, because a 3 goes to 9 in stress. We're just like, I'm out. I can't handle this right now, and so I'm done. Anyway, that would be. It'll be Drew P. Enneagram will be the podcast that we start to talk about that. That'll be fun. All right, we're going to wrap it up there. Nation, thanks for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Of course, as I said, I did. Make sure you hit the links, all the links down below, and to check out more information about our pod. And as soon as I get off here, I'll drop in stuff about what Ryan has going on with Bourbon Pursuit and their Patreon, Pursuit Spirits. Remember, if you can't get access to the bottles in your area, be looking out at sealbox.com, which I'll also link below, where you can get bottles of Pursuit United, which are pretty awesome. You should definitely buy some. That would be good.
Well,
have a good rest of your
the love and support, and thanks for having me on. It was an honor, and I'd love to do it again.
Oh, we will, no doubt, no doubt. Everybody, have a good night. Stay healthy, stay safe, and remember to keep it neat.
Cheers, guys.